Welcome to NFL Road, where NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob. And to begin, I actually didn't put this in the title, but we will talk Niners Vikings. Let me make sure I have it. So to first begin, we talk Jim Irsay, who was talking to his media outlets, and he said the NFL needs to make rule changes, or a specific rule change. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Here's the report. It says Colts Jim Irsay calls for a drastic rule change after the NFL admits to key botched calls against the Indianapolis Colts. It also has the little line underneath it saying, "Don't expect these rules to be implemented." And so basically, what happened was on the final drive of the Colts game, the Browns had a chance to go win it. They fumble the ball. It gets recovered by the Colts. Colts look like they're going to win, and then they call illegal contact. To me, it wasn't illegal contact. Didn't obstruct the wide receiver in any way. More of just putting his hand out there. I mean, he looked more like he was signaling an airplane down than he was to go and restrain Amari Cooper from running his route. But I digress. Then they call a pass interference, which the ball's thrown too far for it to be pass interference. It's overthrown over the guy's head. Even if the wide receiver had a chance to catch it, he's three of his actual feet out of bounds. He's not catching it. And report is written, according to Irsay, the NFL admitted this week that the NFL officiating crew botched two key calls that were against the Colts in the final 50 seconds, as we just described. To keep that from happening again, Irsay has proposed a rule that would make all calls reviewable in the final 2 minutes. Now, that's not a bad idea. I know a lot of people have talked about this. I think that should have been reviewed. You're going to review calls anyway. Make them reviewable in the final minutes. Now, I understand the NFL is trying to say we want to speed the game up a little bit. I get that. But wouldn't you want the game to be called right than it to be fast and be messed up? I mean, who cares if you, in the final 10 seconds, you have to cut away if the game is already in hand? Now, if the game's not in hand, obviously don't cut away. But if the game's in hand, cut away into the next game. That's fine. It goes on and says the NFL admits and understands that they did not make the correct calls at the end of Sunday's game between the Colts and the Browns. Irsay wrote on the social media site, now X, I believe we need to institute instant replays for all calls, including penalties in the final 2 minutes of all games. He worded this correctly, by the way. He didn't say playoff games, which is what the NFL is trying to do with new playoff overtime rules. He did in all games in the final 2 minutes of every game. That's important. In the 39-38 loss, Colts cornerback Dale Baker Jr. was hit with a penalty on 2 consecutive plays. With just under 1 minute left to go in the game, the Browns were trailing 39-33 and faced a 3rd and 4 on Indy's 13-yard line. On a 3rd down play, not only did Browns quarterback P.J. Walker get strip sacked, but the Colts came up with the fumble that was likely going to end the game. However, the Browns caught a break when Baker was called for illegal contact, a defensive penalty that gave the Cleveland Browns an automatic first down, as we just described. On the very next play, Baker was flagged again for an interference with Browns receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. The problem was the call was that the call that the pass appeared on was uncatchable. In that case, the flag should not have been thrown. Both calls were certainly debatable, and it is easy to understand the Colts and why they were frustrated with considering that penalties went up against them in the final 2 minutes. The interference call gave the Browns the ball on the 1-yard line, which eventually Kareem Hunt finally scored the game-winning touchdown. Tom Pelissero said last night the NFL is communicating with teams and saying that the teams should not go on media, tell the media, go on social media and discuss their or discredit officials. I understand don't discredit them. I get that. But at some point, either you make them full-time and you implement some rules that the officials have to follow, or you go and tell them, well, you're going to get fined. You're going to get fined. I understand that a lot of people want to be officials now. I get that. But at the same time, you're going to be fined if you don't do a good job. If in this case, the referee should have been fined. The guy who threw the flag on the pass interference should have been fined. It was not the right call. The ball was not catchable. In my mind, the wide receiver's 3 steps out of bounds even before the ball gets to his hands. Why are we thinking that's catchable? It's not even a catchable play for him. If anything, it's illegal touching, in which the ball goes back. Next up, the Eagles made a trade as they have traded for Tennessee Titans Pro Bowl safety Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard, no one knew exactly he would be on the trade block, as if they didn't really realize what was going to happen. Now, Byard was sent to the Eagles in exchange for, if I can remember this fight, hang on, pull up the details. The Eagles got Kevin Byard, and they traded him for Terrell Edmunds, former Pittsburgh Steeler, signed with the Eagles as a free agent, plus a 2024 fifth and sixth round picks. And we need to talk about this because Jerry Jones did talk on his weekly radio show and said that he wants teams to call them instead of them calling him. And everyone in the media went crazy. He's not going to try and make this team better. No, that's not what he said. It's complete hogwash, okay? What Jerry's talking about is we're going to trade for people, but we'll try and get you off the scent, which won't happen. It's the media. It's the way these things work. But he's trying so hard, but he's throwing all these words and verbiage out to just distract you. The Cowboys did this last year, and they went and traded for Jonathan Hankins, which, by the way, his position doesn't get a whole lot of high praise because it's not a scoring position. It's not a position it's not a position based on you get sacks. It's not a position that you base on getting turnovers. It's not a position of you're playing in coverage. It's not a position of you scoring touchdowns or throwing touchdowns or rushing for touchdowns. It's a position at defensive tackle. Your job is just to stop the run. Add a little pressure, but stop the run is your main priority. So the Cowboys did this last year. So why is it new? It's not. It's just them saying that there's a new policy. It's not new. They've done this for years. Getting him off the scent is all they're doing. But I like the trade for the Eagles. They needed secondary help. I'm a little confused of why they traded Terrell Edmunds, suggesting I understand Byard's a Pro Bowler, but at the same time, like I'm not 100% certain in your rotation behind Byard if something does go awry. So, you have a you answered this problem, but then there's another problem right behind it, and that's something that has to be figured out as well. Next up, the Tennis Titans went and said that Will Levis, their rookie quarterback, is going to start. Will Levis has not been active this whole year pretty much. He hasn't been activated. Now, this is what people don't understand. He's not activated, but he wears a jersey. What does that mean? It means he's the emergency quarterback. So basically, the quarterback does not have to be activated for the game day roster, but he can have his jersey on if he's the emergency quarterback, which Will Levis would be. The emergency quarterback would allow him to wear his jersey, but he would only be able to go in and play if both Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis were injured. But now they're starting him. Now, the interesting part of this is that the Titans are having Will Levis play. He's slated to start, but they're also going to play Malik Willis. Bill Parcells and all these coaches have said these things all over the years. When you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I don't know what the Titans are doing. They go in and said they expect both Willis and Levis to play. Levis is expected to be the starter. According to the report, it looks like Tannehill will be unavailable against the Falcons. Levis was the 33 overall pick in this past draft. It will be starting in which will be his NFL debut. Now, to begin on this, the Ravens and Titans, we knew that was all going to be an ugly game. We didn't expect Tannehill to get hurt and not play, and then we also didn't expect that Willis would come into the game and get sacked 4 times in a quarter. We didn't expect that. So, if I'm the Titans, try something, but playing 2 quarterbacks at once is not the greatest idea. I mean, it has happened in history, of course, but with no success. The 49ers, when they had Montana and Young, before that, when the Cowboys had Roger Staubach and Craig Morton, both had lackluster success. That's the best way I can put it. Next up, Deshaun Watson, and we didn't put this in the more category, but Deshaun Watson has what is called, according to this report, a rotator cuff strain. He is day to day. However, Watson is when I was looking this injury up last night, they said he could be out for 2 to 4 weeks because it's really more like a pitching injury. It's a rotator cuff issue, not a shoulder issue. It's the rotator cuff itself, which last week we were told it wasn't a rotator cuff. So I don't know exactly what's happening. Next up, the Rams are working out kickers after they released Brett Maher after Brett Maher's full performance in week 7, where he ended up missing 2 field goals and an extra point. Maher signed with the Rams in the offseason, in late offseason, and now he's gone. The Rams worked out Mason Crosby, the 39-year-old kicker, played 16 seasons for the Packers. He's also the all-time scorer with 1,918 points, an all-time leader in making field goals with 395, and all-time leader in extra points with 733. The Rams also travel to Texas to face the Dallas Cowboys, in which we'll talk about, where Crosby famously nailed a 51-yard kick, game winner against the Cowboys in 2016 to eliminate the Cowboys. I think this had to happen. You're not gonna allow a kicker to go and cost you games. So this had to happen. So it looks like, as they did work out Mason Crosby, that he's gonna be the big name guy that's gonna get it. Let's see if he can actually do it. Next up, we have the 49ers vs. Minnesota Vikings recap. Both these teams played on Monday Night Football, where the Vikings came out victorious. The Vikings, I thought, what they did, they pressured Purdy, with not always leading to sacks, but pressuring him to make him make decisions he didn't want to make. 2 interceptions, they on him a little bit. The l loss of Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams that lost that big dog mentality. It felt like the Vikings did a great job in getting constant pressure around Purdy, forcing him into decisions. And it's not like Purdy didn't play good enough, it was just the offense was not good enough. Besides Christian McCaffrey, no one else really came to play. George Kittle didn't really start going until the late third quarter. Juan Jennings the same way. It's not helpful. So I think that's why it's happened for the Niners. And on defense, they were not very good. They couldn't get pressure on Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins took them apart. Now Jordan Addison had a great game, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a great second touchdown, which he rips the ball away from Charvarius Ward, who Kirk Cousins was trying to throw to Addison, and Charvarius Ward took it out of Addison's hands on the first drive. But it looks like if this is the way the Niners are gonna play without those guys, it's not gonna be easy to win these games. Like I said, the Niners were the best team in the NFL. I've said that a couple weeks ago, that they're the best team because they're blowing people out. They're actually winning by more than 14 points a game, and yet here they are, unable in the first 2 week the last 2 weeks that they are unable to go and perform. They haven't scored over 17 points. That's the benchmark the last 2 weeks, 17 points. That's not great. That's not where you wanna be. And the Vikings took them apart. Now, what happens heading into this if you're the 49ers? Something has to happen because this isn't gonna work if you play like that. Next up, and I wrote this down. Actually, no. Hang on. Next up, we have Broncos safety Kareem Jackson, who got suspended earlier this week, has gotten a reduced suspension. Jackson has basically had an unnecessary hit in every game that he's played this year and got suspended. The fact that it took this long was amazing. I was actually kind of impressed that the NFL did not get to him quickly. It was a 4-game suspension, which all the NFL defensive players were saying, "That's not a fine, that's not a fine, that's not a suspension, it's a good hit." Clearly leads with the helmet, by the way. But that suspension goes from 4 games, got appealed, reduced to 2 games. He can return as soon as Tuesday, November 14th. Now, before we get to the preview, I want to talk about the double standard in the NFL when it comes to quarterbacks. We talk all the time about how important quarterback play is. and how if a quarterback does not play well, that we should call him out for it. And you get all these channels on all these debate shows, and they all say the same thing. Lamar Jackson, for an example, a couple weeks ago, actually about a week ago, if I'm remembering correctly, they played the Titans. The Ravens won. It was not a high-scoring game. It was a kind of grueling, gritty game. But the Ravens won, and Lamar looked good. And it posed a question on First Take that next morning, saying, "Are the is Lamar Jackson earning his money from the Ravens?" Which everyone said, "No, no, he's not," and they almost emphatically they said no. Well, I don't know what games you were watching. I don't know what games you're watching. The score does not tell you who won exactly. Like, yes, it tells you the team won, but how did the quarterback look? If the quarterback looked good and the team lost, you wouldn't know because you're looking at the box score. But if you actually watch the game, you say, "No, the quarterback was good. He was not the problem. The defense was the problem." Or they dropped 8 passes like the Ravens did a couple weeks ago. 8 passes dropped. They hadn't dropped I think they had dropped 3 passes all year. They dropped 8 in a game. Made no sense. And a couple of those would have been touchdowns. I mean, they had Mark Andrews dropping passes. That doesn't have to happen. But that's what they do. That's what these media shows do. They only show the negatives. They never show the positives. So in this game where the Ravens actually absolutely destroyed the Detroit Lions, and we all thought the Lions had a chance to win, and then the Ravens just blow them out of the water. Like they they basically put the Lions in a position they didn't want to show up. It was 38-6 at the end of the game, but it was 28-point score before the Lions even showed up to the stadium. It was plain and simple. And then which they had to talk about what Lamar did in that game, and the chickens came home to roost, where to use the old phrase, where then ESPN goes on the show and Stephen A goes on the show, he's like, "First off, I didn't say anything bad about Lamar Jackson." "Yes, you did. What are you talking about? You did." And then you come back to the realization after coming out of the fan situation in your brain, you say, "Oh, wait, they don't watch NFL. They talk about it, but they don't watch games. They don't watch the game." And it's it's funny because and this happens a lot, and normally you just pass these things off, and on social media, you always see these people say, "I could do a better job than they do." And a lot of the time you just pass it off, "Ah, yeah, sure, whatever." But then you're like, "Why couldn't you? Why couldn't you?" And that's really why I started this show was because it's like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you start your own show? Why wouldn't you do the things you wanna do? Because these people clearly don't watch the games, and they don't admit when they don't watch the games. They watch one game. Like, it boggles my mind when the media goes and tries to say, "We watched the games." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because if the quarterback looked good, but the team doesn't win, and you blame the quarterback for losing, that's not what happened. It's not what happened. The case of Brock Purdy, for an example. Brock Purdy looked really good in the first month of the year, and everyone said he's a Super Bowl he could be an MVP, he could be in the Super Bowl. The team has lost 2 games in a row, and he hasn't played well. The team hasn't played well, but he's not getting blamed. It makes no sense. You can't be happy for somebody and then go and say, "Well, he's not the reason they lost," when he clearly is, or he is one of the reasons. It's the reason why we came on the show when the Cowboys lost to the Niners, and I said, "No one showed up, no one played well." And that's Dak didn't play well, wide receivers didn't play well, The running game was non-existent. The defense didn't look like they wanted to be there. That's what I said. But then the Cowboys go against the Chargers, and I said the offensive line was not good enough. But they won because Dak Prescott played his tail off. Dak Prescott won you that game because the run game was, again, not very good and the offensive line was not very good. And the defense did enough for you to win the game at the end of the game, which is what they have to do. But those are 2 different games where I gave you 2 different analysis. The 49ers have lost 2 games in a row. They don't wanna blame Brock Purdy, even though he's thrown 4 interceptions in 2 games. He's not the main reason they lost, but is he a reason? Yes. Yes, he is. Not the reason. I think the reason they've lost is that their defense has not played well since the Dallas game, and that they've had injuries at key positions where they haven't played well with those other guys. That's what I think. But this double standard of the NFL where we blame quarterbacks. Again, Jalen Hurts, another example. He leads the NFC East in interceptions, but you know that. You would think it would be Dak Prescott because that's who the media talks about. Dak is the reason. Dak is the reason. Dak is the reason. And I bottled him up. I said it on ESPN. Let's go to the show Speak, which, by the way, it's the dumbest show in the world. Okay, it's really dumb. They don't know what they're talking about. You have Shady McCoy who just talks. He has no idea what he's talking about. He just says things. He's like the best, like, 3-mic'd guy in the world. That if he needs someone to talk a little, he's the guy. But no real analysis. He's incredibly opinionated, and that's what brings him to this show. And they have Joy Taylor on there who I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it 100 times after. The reason Joy Taylor has that job is not because she's a woman. It's not that. I've seen women be very good sports analysts. The reason she's got that job is because of her brother, Jason. That's the reason. Jason was a Hall of Fame player for the Miami Dolphins and played briefly with the Jets for a couple years. But that's the reason she has the job. She's related to a superstar in the NFL. That's what happened. She does not have the job because she knows every detail of the NFL. She doesn't. So don't pretend that you do. Just sit there and be quiet. Or don't be on the show at all. Period. Because your opinions don't make sense. She had to talk about Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott did not play this week. Dak Prescott did not play this week. Dak Prescott played last week and played unbelievable. He did it with everything he had to do and more. And yet somehow they had to mention Dak Prescott. Why? Why did you have to mention Dak Prescott or the Cowboys in general? You didn't have to. We were talking about the Eagles. The fact that the Eagles beat the Dolphins, yes, but that Jalen Hurts threw another interception. He threw another interception. We have to talk about that because you guys made a big deal of it last year when Dak Prescott was doing it. And some of them were not his fault, yet you blame Dak anyway. Now it's, well, I think Jalen, like, this is what they said about Dak. Dak is not a good quarterback. Dak is the reason why they're losing. Dak needs to be replaced and all this stuff. Dak's the problem. Get to this week, talking about Jalen Hurts throwing another interception. Sits there. It's like, I think we need to give Jalen a pass. He needs to have a pass. But Jalen, just please stop throwing interceptions. But it's Dak. And stuff. Why did you bring up Dak? This does not involve Dak at all. It doesn't involve him. Why did you bring it up? It would be like if I brought up Jimmy Garoppolo and how the Raiders haven't looked the same since Jimmy has not played. And yet they go and say, but Tom Brady. It's like, why are we talking Tom Brady? He's the m minority owner of the Raiders. Why are we talking about him? We're not. We shouldn't be, but they do. It makes no sense. That's the way the media wants to win, because they don't wanna lose arguments, so they play both sides. I was with family this past weekend, and we talked about this, and one of my family members went and said, "The CBS crew is so offended if they get something wrong." So they play both sides and then pretend they knew everything. So they don't wanna be wrong, so they both play each side. It's like these people who bet on games. They bet on both horses, and it just kinda goes, and whoever wins, that horse wins. That's it. That's what they do. So yes, they lost, but they won. That's how they look at it. But I also say, yes, you won, but you also lose because you bet on something else too. You didn't win. You lost too. Just part of you won. That's the same thing happens here. All right, moving on before I lose my temper. These people who should have jobs in these industries because they're not great at them. You should be good at your job, not this. After to a week 8 preview, after Monday Night Football, we are 27-16. And our preview begins with the Buccaneers and Bills on Monday Night Football, 8.5. The Bills are 8.5 favorites. Believe it or not, I'm taking the Bucks in this game. I am. I don't trust the Bills secondary. I don't think they're very good. I think the Bills are in the same situation they were last year, unable to unable to go and really play good against they lost to the Patriots and the Patriots carved them up. So with having Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I take the Buccaneers to win this game. I actually have it as a close game, but I have the Buccaneers winning 24-17. Next up, Rams versus Cowboys. This is the Cowboys' first 1 o'clock game of the year. Just we're 8 weeks in. This is their first game at 1 o'clock. It's against the Rams, who, as we wait to see who the kicker is for the Rams, actually, let me check on X. But I don't really think it matters. I think the Cowboys win this game. The Cowboys coming off a bye week. I think the Cowboys coming off the bye week. The Rams kind of struggled. They Matthew Stafford's been terrible when he's been pressured. So I'm gonna say that the Cowboys win this game 28-20. It will be kinda sloppy, but it will be 28-20. I will make note, this is important. This happened last night. Trayvon Diggs, the Cowboys corner, underwent surgery on his torn ACL yesterday. They The good news is they discovered in the surgery that his other ligaments in his knee were all intact, and now he is poised to return for 2024. And that's the best news you can have, is to have when you have an injury like that, okay, yes, your ACL torn, yes, your season's done, but think about it, all the other ligaments are intact. We only have to fix this part. So that's good news for Diggs. But yes, Cowboys win. The Cowboys won 28-20. Next up, Patriots versus Dolphins. Dolphins are favored by 9.5. I just I'm trying to see how the Patriots win this game. If I Let me go and make sure I have this written down correctly, but I think it's the Dolphins are at home in this game. So let me go check. Give me a second. Back. Alright. Okay. Alright, here we go. Yes, it is Miami. And weird things happen in Miami. I have the Dolphins winning this game, and they win it pretty decisively. Dolphins win 30-10. And final game that we're gonna do, Monday Night Football. To me, this should have been the Sunday Night Football game. The Monday Night Football game should have been Sunday night. Sunday Night Football game should have been Monday night because it's Bears and Chargers, and that's not exactly interesting. But it's between on Monday Night Football, it's between the Raiders and the Lions in the Motor City. I have the Lions bouncing back in this game. I don't know what the Raiders are doing. I really don't. They are so up and down, it makes no sense. I'm gonna take the Lions. They win this game 30-14. And that is this week's picks. Predict how many games I got right in the comment section and who you would pick for in this week 8 bout. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hebert. Out.